Welcome to Business Coaching Secrets with Karl Bryan. If you want to attract new high-end coaching clients, fill live events, and build a wildly profitable coaching practice where business owners pay, stay, and refer, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, Karl provides his keys to the kingdom for finding and signing high-paying clients and building the coaching business of your dreams. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, coaches around the world, welcome to another exciting episode of Business Coaching Secrets. It's your boy, the Road Dog, with none other than the man, the myth, the leaf-loving legend, Karl Bryan is here to educate all of us. Sir, welcome to the show.
Mr. Road Dog, what is happening, my friend? How are you doing?
I am just fine, thank you very much. Spring has sprung in the lovely Okanagan Valley. We're going to hit 30 degrees next weekend, their big shoots, which for you, as you would probably just call it, a weekday. So that's fun.
Tuesday. Yeah. It is hot here in the Caribbean, my man. But anyways, so what do we got rocking, Shoots? Tell me what's happening.
Well, we've got what do we have? We've got lots going on here. We got lots of feedback in regards to KB taking a stand on gambling apps. And while we're on that topic, I want to ask you: is there anybody else you'd like to offend? I mean, is there any other things that you stand against or concern you that others might not see clearly?
Okay, and by the way, I saw a little bit of that too. Obviously, that was cool. The like anybody that wasn't listening, you're just talking about gambling apps, and it just seems a little bit insane to me that the highest profile athletes are like promoting gambling. But anyways, is what it is. Some people are.
By the way, it reminds me of all the crypto stuff, which on the Tom Brady roast, it was Nikki Glaser that was making fun of him. Like, you lost $300 million with crypto. And how did you not see that coming? And she said, even Gronk was like, money, no good, real. Like, just making fun of Gronk, and he was just losing his mind.
Nice.
But another one of those things, right? A lot of celebrities endorse stuff, and just because it's endorsed by these big names doesn't mean it's good. So that to me was another perfect example of that.
They got behind SBF, that's for sure. Okay, so we're just talking about some other things that might be a little bit concerning. Yeah, is that kind of the angle we're going here?
100%.
Okay, so again, I don't know if that. And I do think maybe educating yourself at a high level and understanding, like, you're a business coach and you're doing speaking and you're influencing, local entrepreneurs, and then, by default, the local community. I do think that, taking a stand against some things, good or bad, because sometimes it can come back and bite you on the butt a little bit. But I dare say if it's something that's true to you, it will always end up with a favorable result, but you might need to weather a storm. That said, and again, just going, I think I said this last week, but like putting a casino in a young man's pocket, I'm sorry, especially when he's impressionable. And then again, you put the highest profile athletes on TV promoting it. I just don't see how that ends well, and it's not going to have a good ending, my opinion, but let's see. I just say, look, greatest failure comes at the heels of your greatest success, right? So you have a great success. That's sometimes where you need to, raise. That's a professional athlete scores that massive contract, and then often what happens on the back of that, and it's the Lamborghini, and it's the, maybe the separation from long-term girlfriend or wife to maybe something, a different situation. Domestically. So again, your greatest failure often comes on the heel of great successes. And I would say this, Shoots, like, okay, so we're just talking about young men, right? And again, I can't speak on behalf of young women the same way that I can young men for very obvious reasons. I empathize, I get it, I just understand it at a high level. And I just can't tell you, I don't know anything that I'd stand against. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. there are some things, some would be a little bit out the left field, be talking about here, but I can tell you, I think young men going into, becoming entrepreneurs is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I can tell you that it's not happening at the rate that it should do. I think that young men, like the world has been a male dominated place for a long time. And that might be something that frustrates you, and that might be something that you were the beneficiary of. But I can tell you that the trends and the data, and I don't care what the guy on your Facebook feed says, go look at the real data, the real trends, and that you are going to see that young men are in a little bit of trouble, right? And then I think there's a lack of empathy there. And again, just look at the news and look at the angle that they usually get when they make a mistake. And I can just tell you that there's a troubling trend there, right? And again, young women have these issues too, without question. And again, I just know that the young men are going to carry these gambling apps around in their pocket, and the women aren't going to have a problem with it, and the boys will, because of the way that we're designed, right? So, again, these young men, and look at the stats, they're vulnerable to suicides, depression. And when I say depression, I'm not saying a bad mood. I'm talking real depression, and which, by the way, translates into what? Addiction. And then you just got these young men that are a little bit disillusioned. I do think that a way to, I don't know, save is the right word, but to turn that situation around is to encourage those young men to get into business. Think about if you're running like we have a program, Local Legends, that works insanely well. You do local live events at the local chamber. Well, again, what if you were, yes, you're bringing in the entrepreneur, the chiropractor, the dentist, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, but what about the young man looking to start a company? Wouldn't that be a wonderful undertaking and a wonderful thing? If you agree with what I'm saying, and again, please use your critical thinking skills. Don't listen to what I'm saying and just believe me. Go look at the real stats. And again, not the Facebook influencer, but the real stats. You're going to see that it's a little bit troubling. These kids, they scroll social media and they see that they don't have a six pack. They didn't get in early on Bitcoin. They don't have the perfect physique. They haven't bought a Ferrari by the age of 25. And then the translation of that is that you lack drive. How does that make them feel? Not so great. And then, by the way, Facebook knows more about you than you want to know. And then the ads all of a sudden pop up for these crazy, dangerous diets and pills that can accelerate a six pack for a young man in his early 20s, right? Or surgery to become 4 inches taller, right? Like, again, that is now a thing, right? Like, look it up. I mean, this is a thing, and it comes from a lonely, disillusioned man that's just not quite, you know what I mean? That not quite succeeding at the level that they probably want to. And by the way, then that makes them, conspiracy theories. They start blaming AI. They start blaming immigrants. They start blaming their parents. They start blaming the school system. And then what do? Translation, they just give up and they don't play sports. They don't date. Have a look at the real stats out there. If you're, married and in your 50s, you just assume these kids must be dating left, right, and center because they got Tinder apps and whatnot. Well, look at the data, and again, I can tell you it's very, very different from that, right? So they're not dating, they're not partying, they're not going out, they're not, going out and having a good time. They just feel humiliated. So what does a young man do when he feels humiliated? He plays video games, scrolls social media, and watches porn, right? So that being said, I don't know. I don't know. I see something there that I think as business coaches, as a community, there's something that we could address and have a hard look at and say, what does this really say? And again, there's not a lot of empathy out there for a young man coming into his own. In my opinion, you make your own decision, right? So, and then it's like, okay, like what's the solution, or like what do we do? And look, the system is designed for the top 10% to create revolutionary apps, make millions of dollars, get early on things like Bitcoin, achieve Olympic gold medals. And if you really think about it, the system, and I mean, call it the system, it's the school society, right, should be designed to let the 90% have a crack at becoming a 10%, right? And if you agree with that, which I would hope you would, right? Like, so it's not about getting the 10% further and further ahead. It's about giving the 90% the opportunity to go play in the 10%. And then if they come up a little bit short, guess what? They're overachieving, they're achieving, they're doing well. Well, go have a look at Stanford, MIT, Harvard, etc. And then how many applicants do they get each year? And then how many people are accepted? And guess what? Dun, 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 you're going to see a number. In fact, it's less than 10%, right? Well, what is that? When you take an elite human being and then you put him into Harvard, you just take an elite and he becomes significantly further ahead. I don't know if that's, I don't know how good that is. It's a bit like, the highs and lows of I played some hockey back in my day. And I can just tell you the highs and lows of a pro athlete. Imagine playing in front of 75,000 people and then an hour later jumping in your car and driving home alone. And then getting into your apartment, and maybe you got a dog and maybe you got a cat, but there's nobody else there. I got to tell you that the discrepancy in that, the high and low, the yin and yang, the up and down, musicians have the exact same thing. They play in front of 75,000 people screaming and, oh my God, this is amazing to do. And then immediately they walk off stage, and where are they? In a dressing room eating the M&Ms that they demanded in a not so pleasant way, possibly 3 hours prior, right? So no wonder they struggle with addiction and then often die at the age of 27, right? Think of that up and down. Even for the strongest of the strong, I think you can agree that up and down can challenging. And I'm not convinced that entrepreneurs don't have a same kind of plight, the same dynamic in many, many ways. It's very lonely at the top. It's hard to trust people. And their motives, once you've got a successful business and people start following you a little bit, can be a little bit how you're doing. So that said, translation, that is something that I think possibly could be topish of mind, something that entrepreneurs, speakers, business coaches, consultants getting involved in the community could be thinking about. And that's something they could empathize with a little bit to say, hang on a minute, you tell me, as a society to function properly, do our young men need to be, confident? You know what I mean? Do they need to be walking around the streets in an alpha way, in a leadership type dynamic, or do we want them staring down at their shoes, feeling crappy about themselves, and of course staring at their phone? I think maybe that might be something. And then if you were to, again, solutions like getting them into business, helping them become entrepreneurs. Do they really need to go to the local school and spend X amount of years and X amount of tens of thousands of dollars to get a degree that they'll probably do nothing with, and they don't really know what they want to do at that age? Whereas becoming an entrepreneur, what an amazing undertaking. What a great way to get some confidence, make some money, learn some skills. The skills that you learn as an entrepreneur, you know how long you can use them? And the answer is forever. Things like budgeting and being frugal and watching the bottom line, like how could that not be a positive? And by the way, then if you go and you turn around and go, well, how did we get here? Why is that? Look at that. Have a look at the politicians that you've got locally. And you are going to see people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s is what I believe. If you're looking at the same thing I'm looking at, that's what you're going to see. How is that a positive? How does that make sense? These guys, maybe I'm wrong, right? You tell me, use your critical thinking skills, but how is somebody in their 70s understanding of the dynamic of a 21-year-old male or a 21-year-old female, for that matter? You know what I mean? Navigating things like, social media and career and school and, outside pressures. I just don't think they have the, I don't think they have it in them, do you know what I mean, to solve those problems. So then it's like, okay, well, we got to accept that that's a problem. Then you got to bring in younger and younger and younger people to not necessarily become the high-end politicians, but certainly to fill some of those lower, the programs and the associations and that kind of thing. And I don't know, you tell me, I don't really see it out there. I see it in sports, but I don't see it so much outside of that, and get it really, a sporting program will be run by a professional athlete that played in the NFL, that played for the Yankees, that played basketball for the Lakers, what have you. I don't see those other dynamics in business. And forget, I don't see them in business, and I don't see them in other, I don't see other types of, let's call them social programs being run like that, and I think it should. Anyways, so shoots. I don't know if I'm giving the greatest answer, and I don't know how relevant all of that is. Hopefully, a little bit, but that would be something that I would be passionate about. And young men, I'll tell you, it's going in the wrong direction. That's not my opinion. Out of the stats and the data, and maybe collectively as a group, we could look at that and maybe do something small that compounds over time about it. What do you think, Shoots?
It's interesting because all I hear about the younger generation is how, I guess lazy is one word that you hear a lot. But then again, I think you can span that out over generations, because I've kind of been thinking about this, and we talked, because last week we talked about sacrifice, right? And like, how do you weigh success with sacrifice? And like,
Yeah.
I want to dive deeper into that, if you wouldn't mind, just maybe spending like your thoughts on it. Like, how do you weigh success with sacrifice with a client to inspire them to act, right? Because it's tough to say, look, you're going to have to take a step back, or this is going to suck for a while, or whatever. Like, and maybe not even just for your client, but even as yourself as a coach. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are of that sacrifice versus success sort of conundrum, we'll call it.
Yep. I would delayed gratification. In fact, I wrote this in an email very recently, but it's just like, again, you want to become wealthy. Here are some principles you need to understand. And then one of them was delayed gratification, breath. Delayed gratification, breath. Delayed gratification, breath. Remember, Monopoly, you know, all the money happens at the end of Monopoly, not at the beginning of Monopoly. When you play Monopoly properly, you're broke halfway through. It feels like you're losing. So anyways, the clients tend, and this is where managing expectations becomes very, very important. The chiropractor, the dentist, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, they're looking for this instant soup type success. Like they just need to add water, and they're hesitant to realize that there's no magic. You know, this is not magic. You know what I mean? You're going to have to sacrifice. In order to get this, you're going to have to sacrifice that. If you want to go watch a playoff game with your buddy, then your family is going to be without you for the night, right? Like there's a trade-off. If you did that every night of the week, then I think you're going to find that there will be no family to come back to sometime soon. If you don't do it at all, I think that it's going to have not the right dynamic either, because in order, you know what I mean, some boy time, let's just say, might be a good idea in that dynamic. I hope I'm not talking about boy time and not the gals, only the guys here today. That's not the game plan. But again, all of those same issues, are there for the gals for sure. But again, I think someone else should talk on, the realities of them better than I. But I'll just tell you that adding, just add water is a problem, and that managing expectations. Wealth takes time. Success takes time. But do they want to hear it? And often no. And the way that you can frame that up, that yes, we can get you more successful. Yes, we can accomplish those hopes and dreams. But the reality is there is going to be a sacrifice over here. One of the things to be thinking about, though, is to create standards over goals. Right? This is a Tony Robbins 101, but he says you don't always get your goals, but you always do get your standards. So rather than trying to achieve that lofty goal, maybe you look at, how am I going to maintain this level? And that's, do an inventory. Look, do an inventory of do your calendar, your time, your day to day, and look for low, unproductive moments to optimize, right? Example, look, I surf the internet. It's, hockey playoffs going on. I'm surfing the internet and I'm reading articles on hockey more than I should. I want to keep myself updated. There's specific articles that I want to read because I'm a fan. But do I need to read 2 articles or do I need to read 6 articles? I think we could all agree that 2 would be more than enough to get my fix, understand what I need to understand, and then keep moving, right? Watching TV, same thing. Watch a little bit of TV. Look, I think that's okay. Watching too much TV, everything in moderation, including moderation. Like, watching a little bit of TV is great. Binge watching an entire series on Netflix, I'll let you decide if that's a good use of 6 hours, right? Plus. Social media, no doubt that doesn't need to be done, but spending too much time scrolling social media, absolutely nuts. But what we're looking for here are just you're looking to hijack some time back where you were doing unproductive stuff, and then just, start doing productive where you were doing unproductive, and watch what happens. If that's, 3 hours a day, that would be 21 hours a week, right? That would be 80 plus hours a month, right? 80 hours a month, that matters, right? And again, you don't, and what do you got to give up? Like a lot of folks, what they're doing is they're researching local cars for sale, Ferraris, Lambos, or maybe it's the sports car, or maybe it's the VW, combi van from way back when, or it's, again, looking at real estate. Okay, here's the question. As you look for those things, does it make the boat go faster? And we know the answer to that. So maybe if you really, really love cars, search it, but start a timer and give yourself 15 minutes and then move on, right? But spending an hour doing something like researching cars that you're never going to buy and real estate that you're never going to buy when you're not really in the market, but it's just a bad habit. I think that if you took those things and moved it around, you might just find that, wow, 80 hours a month, or, X amount of hours per month. But again, if it was 3 hours a day, that would be 80 plus hours a month, and could be crazy, right? In terms of a difference in your productivity. Or Road Dog Charlie Munger, what does he say? Start with what not to do and things to avoid, right? There's a mental model. I can't think of the name of it right now, but like he says, look, alcohol. Is alcohol going to serve your health? And is that going to serve your sleep? And is that going to serve your morning? And is that going to serve your business? Is that going to serve your goals? And I think we all know the answer to that. By the way, should you cut alcohol out entirely? Which, by the way, I have done, which is still going. It's kind of crazy. But anyways, at the end of the day, I can tell you that I feel great. Very seldom do you meet somebody who quit drinking alcohol that says, gee, I wish I still drank alcohol, right? It's not going to happen. So and by the way, having a couple beers, Road Dog and I are famous for our, having a couple pops, and I don't see anything wrong with that. I just do think that if you follow Charlie Munger's advice, he would say that should be kept in check, so maybe 2 beers versus 6 beers, that kind of thing. Drugs are drugs, and there's all kinds of different drugs, by the way. You know what I mean? Like Tylenol as an example. That's not the kind of drug that he's referencing. But let me tell you, if you're taking Tylenol too often, and let's assume you have a headache, well, I'm going to show you dehydration over a need for Tylenol, right? Like, again, so the drug is a mask to allow you to have that low standard, my opinion. Cheating on your spouse. Again, should you do that? Is that a good idea? Is that gonna end well? Does that make you feel good about yourself? And again, we know the answer to that. So Charlie Munger, start with what not to do and things to avoid. Again, bunch of different examples, scrolling social media, getting into political fights online, getting too passionate about politics. For some of you, look, that's a great idea. For the absolute vast majority, I just don't see how you have a win, right? I just can't for the life of me see how getting too involved in politics, get involved and vote and have your opinion, but letting it consume you, does that make your boat go faster? And I'm going to say probably not, right? So the more clarity you can get, the easier it's going to become, to move forward. Like the more clear you are on what it is that you're trying to achieve, that's what I mean by clarity, right? The easier it is for you to be able to identify different things that are not serving you, right? The alcohol, the scrolling of the social media, spending too much time at the basketball games or too much time at the bar, etc. And also remember, one bite at a time is how you eat an elephant, and that's how you should take these types of things on and lifting that standard. That being said, maybe you want to go cold turkey and go full on and just raise that bar dramatically immediately and really putting some pressure on yourself. The stats would say that a better way of doing it is small, sturdy improvements daily. And then in a month's time, you don't recognize yourself, and those things can be maintained over the long haul, versus the person that goes from bad diet to vegan ends up back on the bad diet in the not too distant future, right? So just one step at a time. Again, you want to go walking, you want to go jogging, you want to go running, you want to do the 10K race, you want to do a marathon like Road Dog does. Look, and you're not a runner and you're not walking regularly. Look, you got to put your shoes on. That's what you got to do. You got to go, take a 10-minute walk before you're going to do the marathon, right? So again, eating that elephant one bite at a time. Talking about business for you and your clients, I've said this for years and I'll say it for more, but you got to have that 25-year vision. And then you've got to create your 10-year vision. And then you got to create your 5-year vision, your 3-year vision, your 1-year vision, and then your 9-month vision, your 6-month vision, your 3-month vision, your 1-month vision, and then your weekly vision, and then your daily vision. And my question is, when you do that 25, 10, 5, 3, 1, etc., does it rhyme? Is today's goal move the boat faster to get you to the 25-year vision? And most people, okay, and I can hear you thinking this, like you haven't even 25 years is too far away for you to even think. So you're trying to get through the week, you're trying to get through the day, you're trying to get through the hour, sometimes, and certainly your client is. Well, a way to combat that, the anecdote to that is that 25-year vision, to make it big. And remember, don't make it about you. So then somebody says, oh, I'm going to make $1 million. I'm going to make $10 million. I'm going to make $25 million. If you want to create something big, meaningful, aspirational, inspirational, make it about others, right? You'll always do more for others than you do for yourself. Other people are exactly the same. Like when I hire somebody, of course they want to know how much they're going to make. I'm going to tell you that's the last thing that we go over. I talk about the vision. I talk about the impact that we're going to make. I talk about the reason we're going to do it. I talk about, the suicides. I talk about my brother. I talk about how marriages break up from lack of love or lack of money over lack of love times 100. I talk about that kind of stuff and then say, so is this the right place for you to work? Right. So again, and, just taking small steps towards greatness. You're not scared of failing. You're scared of others watching you fail. Right. And maybe, by the way, you're scared of your own greatness. Now, I would challenge you on that, which you may or may not be. Your client may or may not be, but I can tell you that it's more common to be scared of your greatness than the opposite. Give you a bunch of different examples of that, but no doubt that just think of the athlete, right, that gets to it. How many, look, when you look at the NFL, Major League Baseball, basketball, hockey, cricket, what have you, you're going to see a bunch of athletes and they've all got people in their hometown that were bigger, faster, better, etc. Okay. So then why didn't those go on? Because guess what? They were spending too much time trying to pick up the girls. They were spending too much time drinking. They were all of a sudden they got into the drugs. They stopped. All of those things translated to what? Stopping their training, etc. And yeah, there's always that gifted athlete that just does it against the grain. But tell you that is very, very rare. I love this Road Dog. Like, see, there's a guy who's like a superstar on a hockey team, right? In a football, baseball, whatever. And then he goes out and he can drink, as much. He can drink 18 beers on Tuesday night, play Wednesday, and play better on Wednesday than he does on Tuesdays. The problem is not, and then the assistant coach says, yeah, but he played amazing. Yeah, we lost, but he played amazing. He played amazing. And then there's a story, and I can't remember who says it, but the head coach goes to him and says, yeah, but he's not the problem. It's the other 5 guys that he took to the bar with him, right? It's like, you know what I mean? And then you end up with this dynamic. So then that individual ends up what? Getting traded from team to team to team, and next thing you know, he's out of the league, right? But I'm going to challenge you that individual doesn't want to be there drinking 18 beers and being a bad influence on his teammates. There's a little bit of, self-sabotage going on. And again, an individual that's scared of their greatness. So I challenge you to challenge yourself. Are you scared of your greatness? I challenge you to challenge your clients. Are they scared of their greatness? And again, creating the framework, the game plan, the one bite at a time elephant approach, the lifting of the standards, the looking of the calendar, and the ruling out of the very important, the menial, the tasks like the watching of the TV and the scrolling of the internet and farting around and making phone calls that aren't really going to, taking too long to do X, Y, and Z when it could have been done significantly quicker, or it could have been outsourced. But then what do they say? Oh, if you want something done properly, you got to do it yourself, right? Which again, that's a low standard. That's absolutely not fact. Yes, there are anomalies, but that's just not, that's just not the anomaly. delegating is significantly better than doing when done properly. So shoots, yeah, look, you got to sacrifice. You know what? Mother Teresa has a favorite or a famous saying. It's like, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And I just think that that's so, insanely powerful. You know what I mean? Like, and what does that mean? And by the way, 3 people will listen to that, and 3 people will take 3 things totally, different away. I know, like, again, I would have been that workaholic for a good percentage of my career. I'm comfortable that I've broken through that, but I still work pretty hard. I will do an 8-hour day on a kind of day off. I like to work, right? I'm very blessed. I do what I love. Love playing with the software, profit acceleration, all our clients. But like, I just know, like, when I read that, I just think of my former self, and just I wouldn't have understood it back then. I would have thought I would. I would have told you I would, and I would have taken meaning from it, but it wouldn't have been the meaning that I now understand, and quite frankly, the one that I believe Mother Teresa was implying. There's another saying. I think I actually sent this out in an email not long ago. Pray like it's up to God and work like it's up to you. I think that's so good. It's like, and most important being the second half of it, work like it's up to you, throwing things to the universe as a general rule. Doesn't, you know what I mean? Just this, you got to work your butt off if you want to get ahead at the end. Anyway, shoots. That's my answer, bud.
Let me ask you something though, because like, so you're talking about Charlie Munger and mental models and all of that. When it comes to this, I guess, the sacrifice and the work, like, how do you manage yourself, right? Because there's coaches, there's clients, I'm sure there's times you struggle with it, I struggle with it. Do you have a formula or a way to easily help direct people in terms of just managing yourself?
Here's the answer I'm going to give you. What most people do is they work off of a to-do list, right? And if you're a coach, I bet you would have heard this, but like, Road Dog is not getting through his to-do list. I'm not getting through mine, and you're not getting through yours, and your client's not getting through theirs either, by the way, right? So now I want you to look at your calendar, and your calendar is the restraint, in that there's X amount of hours per week. Even for the guy that's willing to work 18 hours a day, his restraint is his calendar is time, right? So to manage oneself, one of the most, your buddy Dan Martell, by the way, I believe is very big believer in what I'm describing here. He would say it in a different way, but basically what you got to do is you got to put everything on your calendar, right? Like, literally, because that's the restraint, right? Like, if it's absolutely imperative for me to know, what the Toronto Maple Leafs are up to, and any trades that they're making, any players they're picking up, or in the case when I speak right now, the coaches that they are probably about to let go, not to mention management, then you know what? Put that on your calendar for 30 minutes to go play on the internet, fart around, get out of your system, but get it out of the way, right? I've got to stop, and I got to put together an action plan for a particular client or a staff member or a thing. Okay. Go to the calendar, 30 minutes, and then book it. Right. So to manage oneself, I believe what I'm saying is you gotta, a person that doesn't manage their self well is basically, going to be not so good at, managing their time. Like, look, you need to learn how to manage yourself and your emotions. And if you think about it, it's a new undertaking of the modern world, right? Like, the starting point is to work out your true strengths and your true weaknesses. Okay. And just overarching all of this, I want the restraint of a calendar of time to be there, right? So your strengths and weaknesses, not perceived, by the way, but in reality, backed up by data. Like, a few hundred years ago, we didn't have to manage, like, Road Dog, you didn't have to manage yourself, and I didn't have to manage mine. Like, I was born a peasant, and then I stayed a peasant. Or you were born a merchant, and guess what? You stayed a merchant, right? Everything was kind of just handed to you, and you had little choice in the matter. You didn't have cars and planes, and those things weren't a thing, right? So we grew up assuming that These big titles like MBA, PhD, all these people are the smartest of them all, or that highly religious people are the most honest on average. And my opinion, and you go look at the data, don't listen to me, use your critical thinking skills, go look at it. I think that I know some people who have got PhDs and MBAs who I would not define as overly intelligent in the real world. Yes, book smart, but in the real world and results orientated, I'd say that you'd be brutally disappointed, right? Um, and here's another maybe interesting point around that. Like the data, let's call it scientific research, right? Says that losses hurt twice as much as a win makes you feel good, right? So you go to Vegas, you put $50 down, and you win 8 grand for the argument, right? Well, at the end of the night, you end up losing 4 of the 8. Okay, so at the end of the night, you end up with $4,000 on your $50, but you actually go to bed pissed and a bit annoyed because you're thinking about the 4 grand you lost and not the 4 grand that you made on the $50, right? So, okay, translation. Managing oneself is very important, right? You get a client today, and then you lose a client today. When you go to bed, how do you think you're feeling? And trust your instincts, not very favorable, not very good, because you're giving yourself no, because it hurts twice as much to lose the client as it does to get the new one, right? I don't know. You tell me if that's going to help you perform tomorrow, or the opposite. Is that going to help you perform at a higher level for that client when all you can think about is how pissed off you are that you lost the other one? The answer is no. So just managing and see, you can't solve anything. It's like that issue I talked about with the young 25-year-old male. If you don't acknowledge it, you don't accept it, you don't believe it to be, then we're not going to do anything about it, right? Goes without saying. What I see right now, going back to that point, is I see a lack of empathy and possibly, a little bit of a going at these individuals as opposed to, giving them some cotton wool to say, look, we got you, we're going to prop you back up and we're going to go. Because again, these kids are spending all of their time playing video games, being depressed, getting addicted. And by the way, again, and the women, the data says that the women don't have that same plight. They have plenty. And by the way, and women have made unbelievable strides forward over the last, let's just say 20 years, certainly the last 10. I think all of that should be honored, that should be rewarded, that should be clapped, that should be awesome, and it should be accelerated as well. Okay, but it's not a zero-sum game that it's good for one category and then bad for the other. I think if you look at the data, you're going to find that those males are in a position where they need a little bit of help. And then they got Andrew Tate yelling at them, telling them they're no good. The guy's in jail now, but he's still managing to tell them all how they're no good if they're not driving a Ferrari by the age of 25 and they don't have his level of ambition. And the guy was a kickboxing champion, etc. Right? I don't know that that's overly helpful. I do think that it's helpful for that top 10%. I don't think that it's very helpful for, a lot of the others. And in some cases it is, in some cases it's not. I don't really want to debate that. What I want to come back to is that understanding that a loss is significantly worse than a gain is something that should be managed, right? Speaking of managing yourself, here's what, you don't know what your true strengths are. Well, I'd ask you a question. Do you, right? The data would, when I say the data, I don't want to make out like I'm sitting here studying all this data constantly, but I can tell you that I'm not listening to the influencer on Facebook. That's for damn sure. And I do my best to try and back up, you with critical thinking skills and mental models to get to where I think the right place is. But I think you're going to find you think you know what your true strengths are, but you're quite possibly wrong, right? We're bad at identifying our own weaknesses as well. So you're bad at identifying your true strengths, and you're also bad at identifying your weaknesses, right? And why? Because you're not using real feedback. You're not using critical thinking skills. You're just using your gut. You're using your instincts. You're just kind of going forward, right? Well, what does gut stand for? And that's gave up thinking. I don't know. And by the way, solutions, self-assess the past. What have you always succeeded at? And what have you always failed at? Then be brutally honest. Honesty is absolutely required here in order to establish those things. Not knowing your true strengths and your true weaknesses is costing you millions of dollars. Your client not understanding their true strengths and their true weaknesses, costing them millions of dollars and costing you a client, by the way. That's why you lose them, right? And again, you got to redirect your focus and energy into the things that you've always succeeded in, right? Don't try to change everything about yourself, by the way. It's just too hard and horrifically ineffective. Don't do that. Like, stop the bad habits. We talked about that earlier. And then improve on your natural strengths, right? Don't try to turn your weaknesses into strengths, is what I'm saying. It's just not going to work, right? But you might think that you're weak at something, but it's actually a bad habit. So brutal honesty is a measurement. And you get that, like, brutal honesty. You say, oh, I'm being brutally honest. And I say, well, show me the measurements. And then if you can't show me the measurements, I'm going to tell you that you're not being brutally honest with yourself, with your clients, etc. Right? And then, like, true strengths and weaknesses. Most people think they know what they're good at, but they would usually be wrong. And by the way, there's anomalies, and this is so far from black and white that it's scary, but it's far more common for people to know what they're not good at than what they're good at, right? So again, let me ask you a question. Is it better for you to be dialed in on what you're not good at? Or would it be better for you to be dialed in on what you're really good at and your true strengths are, right? Well, again, brutal honesty, measurement. And you can only perform from strength, right? You can't build high performance on weakness, let alone something that you're not able to do, right? If you can't sing, you can't sing. If you can't play the guitar, I'm sorry. Yes, you can become okay at it, but you're never going to lead Led Zeppelin. Why did I just say Led Zeppelin? Probably not a thing. You're not going to be standing behind Taylor Swift, right, drumming the guitar if you're not absolutely natural. Just look, what I'm saying, past failures weren't from lack of discipline or lack of willpower, but the fact, quite possibly, that you were wrong at what you were good at. And scientists will tell you the human brain is designed for what? You probably know the answer to this, but it is survival. Right? It's designed to trick you, right? You got an inbuilt cognitive bias that makes you overestimate your positive qualities and then underestimate your negative ones. Okay, you got a cognitive bias for you to overestimate your positive qualities and then underestimate your negative ones. On average, people think their IQ is significantly higher. Well, actually, not significantly. Most people think their IQ is higher than it is, right? Like remember 80-20 shoots, like Road Dog, we talked about 80-20 for forever, and people a million times smarter than me and you and talked about this. But 80-20 is not an opinion, it's science. It's backed by the numbers. They didn't come, Richard Koch didn't come up with it and then say, oh, okay, I think I'll write a book about this. The numbers are in, it's undeniable, right? And by the way, ironically, women tend to underestimate their IQ, and then men tend to overestimate, which, I don't know. You tell me, that's a bad thing. But as you're thinking it through, if you're a gal, you might be thinking that, you know what I mean? You might be just, literally, you might be underestimating your IQ, and then the men might be overestimating, right? And like when people do surveys, right, 90% of the people think that they're over average, right? Like not like 60%, but like 90% think that they're over average. And you think, look, a good example, we're talking about hockey and, playoffs. At the beginning of a football season, baseball season, basketball season, every passionate fan thinks, what? This year, they got a real shot. The reality is only one team is going to win, right? And only a percentage are even going to make the playoffs. A lot of the teams are going to stink, and they know it. But at the beginning of the season, you ask them, people think that they're smarter than they are. So I don't know. Just science will tell you, a little bit of a delusion. You're not good at assessing yourself, the situation, what have you. But by the way, assessing it, in an indirect or incorrect way would be better than not assessing it at all, which is what I believe most do. I mean, like the Malaysian, what was it, Flight 370 went straight down into the ocean, right? People with family on board to this day are positive that they watch the TV show Alive, and they're out there, they're out there on an island somewhere, right? Or it's the mother of a brutal criminal. There's so much proof, it's just undeniable. The guy is in jail for life, and she's convinced because he has told her, and his lawyer, right, that he is innocent. And by the way, there are some people in jail, incarcerated, that are innocent, but in the instance that I'm describing, this is a guilty individual. But introduce me to his mom, and I'll introduce you to somebody quite possibly somebody. Oh, and by the way, dad's the exact same, right? Dad's like convinced, oh my gosh, this is unfair, this is unjust, right? And then so shoots, and I'm kind of dragging this on, but like, what's the reality is what's the underlying issue? Why is this? Why does that happen? And it's fear, right? Courage. So if fear is the challenge, what's wrong, then courage is the solution, right? It can solve almost anything for you. It can solve anything for your clients, and it can solve anything for your children, but it can certainly solve anything for you. And you by default, or you by extension, can have a massive impact on something like what we talk, I don't know, your community, on divorce, on business failure in your community. So I don't know, like if you see something, here's what I would recommend. Every time you go to start something, and it's a diet, it's a project, it's hiring a new staff member, it's joining a mastermind, starting a business, doing a Facebook ad campaign, write down in detail what you expect the result to be in 3 to 6 months, right? Then revisit it in 3 to 6 months, and there's your feedback loop, right? And then, by the way, determine the strengths, the weaknesses, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It sounds so simple, but remember, your brain wants to trick you, right? So what happens is you don't measure or acknowledge, you just change directions, right? And if you don't measure or semi-analyze, your brain will come up with all kinds of creative excuses why it didn't work. Timing, lack of money, lack of talent, conspiracy theory, lack of age, lack of wisdom, lack of experience, lack of whatever. My parents didn't support me. The school system didn't direct me, right? So a real harsh assessment would quickly determine that maybe it's a lack of leadership, it's a lack of passion, it's a lack of talent, right? So out of that, and by the way, I have personally exercised blind trust rather than managing projects step by step, and therefore, lacking the management skills and the follow through. So what do you got to do? What I just described as a weakness is a hole where I didn't have the management skills, I didn't have the leadership skills. How do I get them? Courage, right? Excuse mentality takes no courage. Change, hard work, takes courage. It's like my dad's like, I call him the grand poobah of AA. He's been in AA for 52 years. What's the first thing you have to do if you walk into AA, you stand up and say, hi, everybody, this is my name and I am an alcoholic. That takes real courage for somebody who's scared. If you don't have an alcohol problem, it takes no courage, because it's like, you know what I mean? If you're an alcoholic and you're scared crapless, that takes courage. And that's the first step of getting to the absolute truth and admitting the truth, right? So, anywho, shoots. I just look, and it's the alcoholic saying sorry for the 30th time. That takes, you know what I mean? It takes a little bit of courage, but addressing the real and obvious weakness takes the real courage. Do you know what I mean? The saying of sorry is debatably just trying to get an extension. It's taking the Tylenol for your headache rather than, drinking a whole ton of water. It's the doctor prescribing medicine, as opposed to going, look, you're fat, you lack exercise, it looked like you lack sleep by the bags underneath your eyes, you got too much caffeine, too much nicotine, you're eating too much sugar. That's what you need to do. But I'll give you this prescription in the interim, but there's the real problem. How many doctors are saying that, right? And again, debatably, that's going to take a little more courage from a doctor. And I don't know that they're exercising that. I think what they're doing is exercising, here's a pill, take this for your blood pressure. Shoots, that's my answer, like managing self. That's and if you need to manage self, look at the restraint where I started with the calendar. I think that's the to-do list is no restraint, because it could just go on forever. It's the calendar that's the restraint, so manage that. So that's my answer, Shoots.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. I'm taking a big chunk of that myself today, Big Shoots. So thank you for that. Okay. Well, you know what? We're going to end it there, because that was a lot, and I really hope that everybody got as much value out of that as I did today. So thanks again, there, Big Shooter, and thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of Business Coaching Secrets with the man, the myth, the business coaching guru. We're going to go with guru today, Big Shoots. You deserve the guru status today. But hey, if you're not on the inside and getting access to the pre-show, or you aren't getting Karl's daily emails, or you want to learn more about flash coaching, profit acceleration software, you want to learn how to properly grow, scale your business, and how to get a team of coaches working under you, go to focus.com and subscribe and get all the information there. And again, if you enjoyed the podcast, please share it, please review it. We love seeing all the reviews, and feel free to keep the questions coming, folks. We love those as well. And that is it for another week. We will see you on the next episode. And remember, progress equals happiness. Take care, everybody.
Karl Bryan built Profit Acceleration Software 2.0 to train business coaches how to find any small business owner more than $100,000 in 45 minutes without them spending an extra dollar on marketing or advertising. This becomes a business coach's superpower. So as a business coach, you'll never again have to worry about working with business owners that can't afford your high-end coaching fees. Check us out at focused.com.